and rectify myself to this place. I like using the word rectify. So it usually gives me a little bit of a lean-to. I'm not sure attain to the level of comfort which I desire, but I can't see any way to embellish it just yet. I could put a little towel there. Let me see if I can put this down. That's the eagles. The eagles are calling king. Wow. I think it's the same too as last time. And sexual predators, teachers, people who work for the system, they prey on people like me. They just do. That's what they do. Who knows what their intentions are? Who knows what the intentions of the teacher is? Anyone ever asked a teacher what your full intention is towards the children you are controlling every day? My intention. I've never had to talk about that. What about the effect? Never asked children 10, 20 years later. I mean, children that remain possessed of their critical faculties, of course, because enough, a lot of people don't really have the ability to criticize the teaching establishment, having been adequately informed about, how they need to think for the rest of their life by being subjected to it. Our school, we love you so. It's a place where we can play with and learn how to make lots of dough. Play-Doh. You wonder that Play-Doh has the word dough, and it's play money, because the financial system is basically for children playing with money. And getting you want to make it, obviously you want to generate a lot, but then what you do with it is like learning a football. If you want to be good at football, you got to know the rules. You need to know the right people. Make your money work for you. But you got to get enough money to buy an income property, and then you have to make enough money to be worth investing. And you can get good at that by the age of 21 if you want to, depending on how things come about for you. The thing about the middle class is that they're surrounded by other liars, just like them. So they protect each other, and at times they attack each other, and they divorce each other, and they abuse each other, and they cheat each other, and they rob from each other. But they never think that it's something about being white middle class people and about how much of their life is based on magical thinking. One of the reasons I've never been able to socialize, that no one ever asks children, is I don't know how to act. Think about that. I don't know how to act. I have over 200 IQ and I don't know how to act around you. What I've learned from years of study and walking around is that animals have a natural language. That sexual predator, that man, even his dog doesn't speak a normal animal language. There's something weird about his dog. It's almost humanized. Even their dog is kind of mentally ill. That takes a lot of work to fuck up your dog like that. Wow, that's a lot of sun. Oh my goodness, that's nice. Oh, I haven't had this in a year. It's been like a year. Hello, Raven. Making a nest. I'm gonna stay here for a while. This is so warm and nice. My mom indicated it would be like cold and bitter today, but I said, no, we're gonna need some sun. So here it is. Fuck the Illuminati. When people are playing roles and acting, they can enjoy an extraordinary range of behavior that includes the range that you might enjoy, in so much as the demands that are placed upon you in the entire spectrum. Wake up in the morning when you're 3 years old to when you go to work when you're 55 years old. The range of acting of the average police or RCMP officer between stretched across that time, or between they wake up in the morning or they wake up in the dawn of their existence, and the exertions which they undertake in their professional capacity from day to day, and the lengths and or even the extreme lengths at which people get raped and mutilated and incarcerated and demonized. And you have first initiative to extend parasitical behavior and a deceptive and woefully predatory vernacular practiced by various members of cult that has qualified them by the extraordinary lengths to which their families have gone to survive and work and indeed lie to each other for generations and themselves in the name of learning how to act under various economic conditions, which is all white people do in general. And then by the time someone comes along who suffers some neurotic desire to complain about whatever the fuck you've done to them, what you can do is tell you how much you need to protect yourselves from them and put them in jail. And so anything you can use to do that, anything you can fling at them, police can sexually assault you and hit them, you're going to go to jail for 10 years. Do you understand? And how do I know this? Because an RCMP officer taught me this, and taught what was at the time a good female friend of mine this, by sexually assaulting her and throwing her to the ground and saying, touch me, I can put you in jail for 10 years if you do. Do you understand? They make it, the people in these cults always make it perfectly clear what the rules are. They'll tell you if they educate the public. They go to the local school and say, hey, I'm an RCMP officer, and da-da-da-da-da. They find vulnerable people, men and women, and they show them too. It's a different type of education. It's a stretch. And the same person they are when they go to your elementary school. They become a different person because there's versatility in the kind of people they can be and the kind of things they can do to certain, because that's what cults do. And if you don't like it, that's your problem. That's my problem. It's not their problem. You're the one with the problem. Jesus, what's wrong with you, right? And part of being around liars is, of course, what you don't see, you don't hear, and you don't say. And so your vernacular is based on filter systems for what constitutes genuine communication and what constitutes the substrate and the force of the substrate of passive-aggressive communication, which ties you together as a group, means a kind of unspoken intimacy among different, say, members of a police force with respect to those who don't speak that secret language, who are outsiders or civilians and potential victims. Everything about a cult and a cult like the police gives them dominance, right? Qualified immunity and dominance over anyone they want to inflict any kind of pain upon, whether they think of it that way or not, and especially if they don't. And cults, any way you put people together as a police force or under similar demands, are going to do that. They're going to do that, right? And so, in a sense, a lot of people don't want to criticize the police because, in a sense, in their own life, they have to act like liars too. You could hardly criticize someone whom is more to your advantage to worship them because, you want to make nice with the police. The idea of someone getting a camera and saying, fuck you, you cunt weevils, is basically a relatively modern occurrence, right? And not a lot of us really want to do that. But there are people who can and do. Usually alpha males, alpha females, who can basically cut through the bullshit of this cult and the allure and the luster of heroic, if tragic and macabre authority, which they have wielded over the human being for 1,000 years. Different types of police officers, which are basically tribute collectors or tax collectors for the ruling power and cult of the earth, and have become a critical instrument in the expansion of its power and filtration into the behavioral modification that we call everyday culture in the Western world. You can take it from the language, you can take it from what is popular, you can take it from the effects of human interaction, you can take it from conflict dynamics, sex dynamics, you can come at it any which way you like. Now, does it feel good to think that way about the police if I'm a vulnerable person? What do you think the police think of me? Well, before I ever managed to concoct an opinion about the police, I was already being sexually assaulted by them in every sort of epoch of my life. They're allowed to sexually assault you. They're allowed to make you feel unsafe doing something that you might have misguidedly and ignorantly thought you should be allowed to do safely as you have all the other days of your life. And they don't need a reason to do that. You're the reason to do it. Their job is the reason to do it. The fact that there are criminals that might be you wandering the streets out there are the reason to do it. It doesn't matter how peaceful you feel or how peaceful you look or the fact that you've never hurt anyone and that you would never normally be able to lower your inhibitions enough, no matter how many cults on and any number of cults. And I think what police learn to do is sort of what I learned in a day of telemarketing when some greasy, ponytailed, greasy hair type of guy taught me how to really get into the role of the telemarketer, really being excited about selling an old woman a useless $60 dining for a restaurant she would probably never use. It wouldn't be worth it if she did. Okay? I made one sale with gusto, mucho gusto, and then I quit. But he was like, oh, right on, man. You could teach other people. You're really good at it. It's like, okay. I guess I'm a salesman, I guess. And I felt like shit. Like, this is not worth the money. And I was quite happy. Most of the people were just like, they didn't care. They're just trying to make their money and go. They didn't want to be there. They weren't there. And to be a police officer, you have to kind of lie with gusto and learn to get excited and pumped up about that. It has to be normal. Now it's just a way of life, right? You're making the sale. Policemen are salesmen. So the sale has already been made for them, right? They get a knock list of like, okay, you can go, and it's like a done deal. You just have to collect the money, or you have to collect them. If you don't have the money, you can collect their car, you can collect them, you can take their peace of mind, you can take the use of their right shoulder, you can take their connection to their family, you can put their children in social services, you can ruin their day if they're weak, and you can do it with gusto, and you can grab them by the balls, you can taser them up the ass, you can take them someplace and the female can shove her hands up your ass and rape you and make you bleed. Nothing will happen to you. And the police force are like, hey, all in the service of our profession. And everyone in the public's like, oh God, we're so thankful we have the police. God knows what would happen if they weren't there. We might actually be in peace, right? They're just tribute collectors. In addition, to think of them as heroes. TV, everything, the police trooper, you know, like, yeah, these cuntwads are bound to do something decent now and then. They probably love, it's like, oh fuck, I finally got to not rape somebody. And most of what they think is happening is what they're doing to other people. You think, they're like, oh, a police officer dies every 30 seconds. Oh, it should be more than that, right? There are thousands of people who are molested to the point of death every day all over North America from people practicing, which is a curious use of what we call the law. And the law is a prophet language. Sure, it's there to tell you what's right and wrong and what happens if you do things bad or unlawful to other people. But in a broader sense, it's a marketing scheme in order to make money from human conflict. And to do that, you have to stir up conflict. And the police stirs up conflict by exhibiting all the types of biases you would expect from someone who's a pathological liar and whose fundamental loyalties, as though from the crib, were formed by learning a language that was highly compatible with manipulating, creating realities, or fabric truths in an instant, and to abide and cooperate with any other people who need to do so. That's what they do. They stretch the law, but it's also kind of the law is meant to be to collect things from people whom they basically execute, prosecute, try, judge, and jury all by themselves in the span of seconds. Right? The nervous system of the receptionist and the operator and the police that arrive at your scene has already gone into 99% of the state of mind and operation and vernacular that's already going to execute and prosecute a person pre-chosen at the scene of that crime. It's epiphanic, right? Once the police officer, who they're going to do violence to, or what aspect of human decency they're going to piss on today, it travels back and forth through the system and is accepted with a rousing assent in terms of any and all possible and future profits that can be made from the twisting and fabricating of reality. This is what people in a cult do. This is what Christians do. You could hardly blame any of them for it, because you could only really make people behave this way if they were fucking sexually molested and oppressed for 1,000 years, right? If you want to think that humans are naturally truthful and good, that's great. But if you think about what's happened to them and what's happened to us, that you could still think that humans are effectively good people living in the modern world. They're not. How could you be? You could sooner live in a septic pond and be a water purifying neophyte of the ultimate purity of human existence. It's ludicrous on face value. Now, you can still be strong and be healthy and fend off the darkness and all those things. But what I'm really concerned about is people that are overly cavalier about their place in the world. I think the people who live the longest, like my mother, are people that live with a certain amount of economic and personal insecurity every day of their life, but also have faith enough in themselves to exercise and to where they can do everything they do with a great focus and concern for fulfilling their interest in the well-being of other creatures. Even if they can't do it for their children, if they can do it for a dog, if you can do it for a plant, if you can do it for yourself, if you can do it for your future children or the rest of the world in some sense, and you can do that by yourself without too much cult participation, you'll probably live longer, you'll be a more versatile, healthier person, and you'll find ways in anything that you happen to do, even playing a crossword on your phone, to focus your attention and your clarity of thought. I don't agree with every way that people try to do that, but I agree that there's a similar level of satisfaction that is attained by undertaking to improve one's clarity of mind in various ways. Even though I might disagree with some of those choices, and maybe even argue that the clarity of thought being attained is not as legitimate as you think. So for instance, if you run 10 miles every day, you're going to be pretty fucking focused at, during, or after, at some point, because the resources you're going to have to muster in order to answer the challenge that you're presenting your body and your mind and your respiratory system. And in turn, the endorphins and other related chemicals are going to make you feel pretty fucking fantastic. So it's a pretty good thing, but you're not really thinking while you're doing that. You're not, it's like trying to think when you're having sex. Yes, you'll have some pretty cool thoughts like, oh I'm gonna change the garbage can that I use downstairs while you're fucking. It was like, you know what? I think our youngest daughter needs a tutor. Oh, and your sister Janice. Oh my God! I just once I'd love to see her naked and rub my dick all over her ass. And these are the thoughts that fly through your mind. Highly focused thoughts. And afterwards you're like, wow, who knew? Janice, hey? Man, if you think about that. Right? Grass and in moments of euphoria and moments of great pain, you may have great focus and clarity of thought. That the only way you get clarity should be when you're fucking or hurting yourself in some way. Overall, you're not really building a high fidelity of your subconscious and conscious mind. You're becoming a better soldier. A soldier's focused too. That doesn't mean they're a thoughtful being. I mean, a soldier. That's the opposite of thoughtfulness. A Saul diver is because so many year by year of their life, they've learned to live without a father, and without their father, the sun, which is the warmth and not just the abstract concept of the sun and all it represents in terms of the warmth of your home and the birth and growth of your own flesh and blood. That's what the earth is. Why don't you know that already? Because you live in a modern, barbaric society on death. That's why the sun is said to be dying all the time. You go from lust to lust and from dust to dust. I think a lot of women live their lives between one guy that gives them a vaginal erection to the next guy, which women see as love, or he's cute, or just a fun part of life. And looking in magazines to see how many different orgasms you could have by yourself with your best friend or something, and all this kind of stuff. And I don't mean to insult young women, but I think you're worth more than that. I think this is very fun. I think I am very smart. Smart people should definitely not work, but just make YouTube videos by themselves in nature. That's what the really smart people should do. I wonder if that's considered a thing somewhere. I think the closest thing is like in Japan, they have a thing called forest bathing. White people don't buy this, but it's like, it's actually good for you. Japanese people are amazing to sit for any amount of time, because you're absorbing like a wonderful, call it energy, call it revivifying direction of different etheric levels of your flesh and blood, whatever you want to call it, the stirring symbiosis that one can enjoy with a place that is unburdened, relieved of, and despoiled with respect to the usual types of stresses that people come to consider the reality of their daily lives. To be deprived, if you will, of the incomparable benefits of a television, a home, and 3 screaming children, and somebody hitting you up for a debt that you can't afford to pay. My father was always quite cavalier about his bills. I like that about him. Undaunted. Oh, that sun sort of disappeared for a while. Hey, chicken baby, hey, hey, chicken baby. Hey, chicken baby, hey, hey, chicken baby, hey, hey, chicken baby, hey, hey. So, yeah, I lost count of how many sexual predators I've seen today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pick up sticks. Pick up sticks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pick up sticks. Pick up sticks. 5 predators. I had to be near your uncomely assholes. I walk by a coffee shop that's staffed by sexual predators, almost exclusively. Women. It's owned by female sexual predators. In 100 years or in 10 years, I'll write a science fiction book of a world where all these people are sexual predators, but the rest of the world thinks they're normal. And I'll think I'm going to call it gorilla. I'm not sure what I'm going to call it. Gorillas in the mist. It's too close to me right now. I notice that things sometimes are better to give it some time. But all the information is there. The knowledge, the experience, You know, even as I'm making these videos, you might think, I'm not saying you do, but let's say someone could think, like, this is stupid, this is silly, what's this guy doing? What practical value does it have in his life? Now, I can't make any definite claims because, quite frankly, this all occurs to me in the moment after thousands of hours of faithful YouTube talking. But everything I'm going to do in life is going to be based on my ability to process shock. And talking about it preserves to me many orders of confidence that I might gain years and years after the fact in my ability, if nothing else, to learn something from my experiences and share them with other people in a meaningful, pleasant, peaceful way. So instead of saying, oh, I hate women, they're all rapists, I want to tell you how the vagina is only here to fuck you up, man, fuck you. But I believe that. At the same time, as I've also learned and would like to believe, that the vagina is a beautiful thing, and that to come from a vagina is to solve all sins and to forgive all ills. And we should just be thankful for ever coming out of one and shut up about anything else we don't like about how women treat us. So I make distinctions when I talk about what a woman or your mother has done to you and what people do to other people because other things have been done to them. And I make use of the feminist advance of the idea of structural prejudice, which I'm sure I'm misusing, but when I say that human beings in any kind of social structure, for the purposes of feminism, maybe, you know, in the interests, hopefully, of anyone who would like to, all, you know, a few things. One is, if you're hurt, if you feel sexually assaulted in any way for any reason, that's very scary to begin with. Then you might be shocked by it. I mean, the very nature of the beast is you'll develop shock, which has a mind of its own. So I won't go into that, but let's just say it's enough to say it has a mind of its own. And you know if you've got shock because you'll have like an anger that comes up about things that has a mind of its own. It makes you worry, like, is this angry enough that I'm going to do something one day? I'm sure I'll have to do something, or at least talk about it. And in which direction is that going to take my life? And that's pretty scary too. And in a sense, a lot of people who are sexually assaulted feel like they're going to be arrested if they let out their emotional knowledge about what's happened to them, which tells us in turn about the shock and about how that shock can inform us about not just what that person has done to us, but what other people just living their daily lives, like you and me, who think everything's normal, have contributed to in making it possible, or at least not making it impossible in terms of the invariable and inevitable, by the logical extent of what most people believe, indices and vacuoles and spaces and gray areas, just like everyone was some kind of violence or sexual lawyer, where people, out of their own sense of or stupidity, have eked out domains where violence itself can happen and people can go about their lives normally. Being part of what then seems like a social capacitor for discharging the most unqualifiably physical effects on a human being without even having to touch them, let alone what people do to each other's body, and leaving them with a completely changed condition in life, which is basically what shock is. Shock is violence. It completely changes your life, right? And nobody's wrong, and the victim's going to have trouble talking at all, let alone figuring out how they're supposed to feel about one thing or another, about how this happened to them, either what they did or what they do, or what people around them, if they try to say something, will fail to hear, and what they even try to start saying to recover from shock. Imagine someone in a movie waking up from a coma after being gang raped in the rodeo and sent to another planet and gang raped over there, and all kinds of things happen, and they're finally waking up from a coma to start their new life of not being gang raped by alien beings. And they start opening their mouth to speak, and it's incredibly hard because they shove rags down their throat and shove their cocks down their throat on a regular basis. And, you know, if they said anything, they beat them and rape them even more. And they start to make a sound, and the people around go, oh, that's okay, we don't need to hear that. That's how it feels when someone's been sexually assaulted and they try to tell somebody. And that's the effect of what feminists, I think, would call structural prejudice. Right? And there's other things I could talk about in quotations and stuff in history, but, you know, you kind of know it if you've experienced it, and if you don't, you may have occasion to object to the way I'm using that concept, as I'm sure most concepts can be used in an objectionable way. because the people who are usually better trained than I to use those concepts and who have studied them may perhaps more or more legitimately and longer or deeper or more faithfully than I have, it exists to be used only within a context defined properly, failing which you're bound to misuse the term or defeat the purpose of the term to begin with. I'm just a misogynistic password that's using structural prejudice or racism or sexism for my own pugnacious purposes, and it serves no practical value to the faithful pursuit of the safety of all mankind, and particularly the female kind of mankind. I could say more about that, but these are all true things. And you know what? I don't lose anything from the truth. Like, people, I don't want to have an argument, but that people could object to anything and everything I'm saying is the truth. It is the truth. I still feel right. I still need to say these things. I'm still enjoying saying them. They're giving me a little bit of relief. They are scary. They need to build into something day by day and year by year. And sometimes I get a feeling sitting here, like say in the sun, which is rare. It's a special day for me. That shocking things from me that I have been talking about and my voice strengthened and tested more than ever before in the last 4 years, given these shocking events, that over time they will be very useful in talking about certain things, while perhaps remaining at least a little bit embittered that I was forced to do so. Most of what I do, maybe other people could agree about myself or themselves, I've had to do. I'm here because I have to be. Oh, sure. Like, I woke up one day and decided, yeah, it's lovely to not work and go and walk around all day and smoke weed and talk about things that, no woman who ever wants to see your penis ever wants to think about having to listen to. Because, what the fuck are you good for? And you're crazy, and you should think of yourself as the smallest, stupidest, weirdest, creepiest, most useless flesh and blood that ever walked the earth. And, don't worry that you don't have to stain or sully your mind by confessing to such a declaration, from which I'm sure I should never recover, and perhaps have never recovered, inasmuch as that declaration, I believe, is kind of uttered as some kind of at least abstract specter over the human mind of all children for 1,000 years, should you dare to try to really be yourself. That's somewhat of a rhetorical statement. It's a religious statement. It's a satisfying statement. It doesn't have to be absolutely true, and I acknowledge truth, and among true things is that you don't have to feel like that's remotely true about you. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm wrong. It's a useful thought. Just like, look in your toolbox. I mean, sometimes it's an instrument, even if it's bent in a weird shape. It works. Like, do you always know why everything works? Do you know why that part of that